system, we can move forward.
Yes.
Okay, all right. So everything in our body is made up of a single unit. We talk about cell. That cell is the structure and functional unit of living organism. When we talk about bone, they are made up of osteoblast cells, osteoclast cells. When we talk about muscles, there are muscle fibers, that myofibrils that make up and then make up muscle bundle and then the whole muscle. So when we talk about nervous system, what do you think? What is the basic unit of nervous system?
We have the neurons and the neuroglia cells.
Yes, the neurons. The neurons are the basic unit of nervous system that comes together and make up this whole nervous system. This is how a neuron looks. Can you identify its parts?
In the center, the purple point is the soma,
Yes,
and then we have the peripheral extension, which is the dendrite,
yes.
and then do we have only one dendrite and multiple axons, or is it the other way around? One axon
We
and
have
multiple
one
dendrites?
axons and multiple dendrites.
Okay, so the long extension is then the
Axon.
axon, and on the left side, the multiple extensions are the dendrites.
Yes, you're right. Brilliant. So this is axon. We have a soma, that is the body of the neuron, and from body there are dendrites, and at the right side there are axons, and at the end of axons there are axon terminals. All right, the dendrites receive information and move it towards the body of the axon, and from the body towards the body of the neuron, and towards the body the information is carried away from the neuron by the axons. So dendrites are receiving information and moving it towards the soma, and from soma the new information is carried out by the axon away from the soma. All right.
Mm-hmm.
So the whole nervous system is made up of this structure, that is neurons, and there are other many structures and neuroglial cells and other structures, but the basic structure that we need to know that is forming the whole nervous system is neuron. In the advanced lectures when we study, then when the bodies of neurons come together, an area where the bodies of neurons are together, that area is known as gray matter. And the area where the axons are bundled together and the fibers, there are many fibers and fibers, that area or that structure is known as white matter. You have heard about this or not?
Yes.
So
I think it was separated because the neuron body, the soma, contains more fat, and that's why it is brown.
yes, you're right. So that is we will be studying, we will be having deeper looks into that, but the basic structure, that is neuron, if we are familiar with that neuron, so when we talk about that, there are at some point there are collection of cell bodies of neurons, so we don't get confused. So when we talk about that there is an area where there is collection of axons, so we do not get confused. Is it clear?
Yes.
All right.
White matter for the axons and gray matter for the neurons.
For the cell bodies of the neurons.
Yeah, sorry, for the
All right.
soma.
So we are studying again the divisions of nervous system. The two main divisions, you know about it, the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. In this trial lecture, we would be mainly the main focus would be on the illustrations, on the diagram, so that we can visualize the structures. So it would be easier for us to memorize the structures. And then when we have memorized the structure, so it would be easy for you to go on when we will study the deeper concepts. All right.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So this is a simple illustration to understand what is central nervous system and what is peripheral nervous system. At the left side, there is brain and the spinal cord. On the right side, there is peripheral nerves that are branching from spinal cord. Is it okay, or you have any confusions regarding this?
It's clear.
It's clear? All right. So, central nervous system. First, we discussed main divisions of nervous system. That is central nervous system and peripheral nervous system. Now, we will be focusing on central nervous system. That what are the parts that make up the central nervous system? So, there are two main parts, brain and spinal cord. Is it clear? You can see in the image that there is brain, and from the brain, the extension is spinal cord in the yellow color.
Yeah.
All right. So this is the diagram for you to understand that where is CNS located in our skull. We are looking at from the sagittal section, from the side view, that there is skull, the brain is housing in the skull, and from skull the spinal cord is branching. The spinal cord is coming down, that is traveling in our vertebral column. There is a canal between in the vertebral column. We'll be looking at this, but the brain is housing in our cranium, skull, and the spinal cord is housing in our vertebral column. Is it clear?
Yes.
Do you recognize the shaded structure that is lying beneath the main brain structure? That pink shaded area, what is it?
It's the skull.
It's a skull, but I'm talking about the shaded area. The shaded area, the small structures, that is
the cerebrum and the cerebellum.
Cerebellum, yes, you're right. That is cerebellum, and in front of the cerebellum, that light yellow colors, that fiber-like structure is your spinal cord, that is moving in a vertebral column. Is it clear?
Yes.
All right. This is your skull, and we are looking from inferiorly. The skull is at the top. We are looking at from the inferior side, and what I'm trying to show is the foramen magnum. That the skull, the brain is housing in our cavity, cranium cavity, and for the spinal cord to come out of the brain, you need a passage. Your examiner can ask that where the brain terminates and spinal cord starts, what is the structure in the skull? That structure that the arrow is pointing is your foramen magnum. At this point, the brain terminates and the spinal cord starts. And beneath the foramen magnum is your vertebral column. Your cervical spine starts C1, C2, C3, and so on. You have any confusion in this?
Is the brainstem already a part of the spinal cord, or is it still part of the encephalon of the brain?
Brain stem terminates at foramen magnum. Beneath the foramen magnum is your spinal cord.
Okay.
So foramen magnum is the point you need to remember, the point where brain terminates. The brainstem is a part of the brain. The brain terminates and the spinal cord starts. So we need this to visualize, to understand that this structure, this is the structure from where spinal cord is passing. All right.
Yes.
Okay. So here we go. Beneath the skull, the point where the skull is ended is your C1 vertebra, that is your atlas. The image on the left side, and on the right side is your axis. You have studied skull anatomy before?
Yes, in the first year.
All right. When the skull terminates, beneath the skull there are vertebrae that is making up our vertebral column. The first vertebra, that is C1, is known as atlas, and the second vertebra is your axis. The thing I want you to focus is the passage you see like in a ring form. Can you see it in the both vertebrae?
Yes, the central foramina.
Yes, the central foramina. This is the area from where the spinal cord is going to pass. There was foramen magnum where the brain terminated, and from after that the spinal cord is starting, and spinal cord is passing through these spaces. So we will be clear about that where from where the spinal cord lies. You have any confusion in this?
Which ligature or structure is enclosing this central canal?
You see, that is your anterior tubercle in the atlas, anterior tubercle, and there is posterior tubercle, and there is transverse foramen. You can see there is a passage, the area where it is written lateral masses. You can see that area in first cervical vertebra.
Yeah.
So this is the area. You can see that it is surrounded by an area. There is anterior arch, there is superior articular facet, there is right lateral to that, there is transverse foramen. We are not studying the anatomy of cervical spine. We are just studying the passage of the our spinal cord, so that we can know that where it is located. So when in the clinical area, when we see a patient with spinal cord symptoms, so we understand that where it is located. All right.
Yes, this is clear.
Okay. This is a typical vertebra. This is your typical cervical vertebra, and the area that is denoted by number 5 is your canal from where spinal cord is passing. Anterior to that, it is your body of vertebra, and posterior to that, it is the spinous process of cervical vertebra. So right now, I want you to focus on the area from which spinal cord is going to pass. Is it clear?
Yes.
Let me know if anything is confusing you. I am here to teach you. So don't hesitate. If you have any question, you don't need to wait for the next event. All right. So there were two main structures of the central nervous system. Can you name those two structures of central nervous system?
The brain and the spinal cord.
Yes. So right now we are looking at the brain, and we are looking at the brain from a sagittal section, from the side view. Okay, if a person is standing and if we are looking from the side, then the brain looks like this. All right, and we have studied that where the brain lies. Where in the human body the brain lies?
In the cranium.
In the cranial cavity, and it is continuous with the spinal cord through the foramen magnum. You remember the foramen magnum?
Yes.
All right, and it is surrounded by 3 meninges. There are layers of the brain, that 3 layers of the brain and the spinal cord that protect the brain and spinal cord from different traumas, from different accelerations, deceleration forces. There would be a separate lecture on these meninges, but right now we can look at the names of these meninges. There is the dura mater, the outermost layer. There is arachnoid mater, the layer next to dura mater, and that is a pia mater, that is your innermost layer.
So if the dura is the outer one,
yes,
they are lying on top of each other.
Yes, there is pia mater, that is right above the brain. If it is your brain, then the layer that is immediately over the brain is your pia mater. After, if this is pia mater, there is a arachnoid mater, and after arachnoid mater there is dura mater.
Okay.
And then you have skull, and after skull you have your scalp, and then your hair, then all right.
Okay.
All right. And we have a separate lecture on these meninges. I have seen your course outline, so we would be there would be a separate lecture on these meninges. We can move on. All right.
Yes.
So the brain is further divided into 3 main components. That is your hind brain, midbrain, and forebrain. All right. So the hind brain is when we are studying the brain from the spinal cord. What is the structure that lies above spinal cord? That is your hind brain. Above hind brain, this is your midbrain, and all the topmost structure of the brain is your forebrain. You can see it in the image. There is forebrain. Beneath the forebrain, there is midbrain, and in the end, there is hindbrain. And below the hindbrain is your spinal cord. All right?
So the midbrain is kind of the center,
Yes.
and the hindbrain is the extension of the spinal cord,
No,
or
no, no,
connection
no.
of the spinal cord
Yes,
to
yes,
the
yes,
encephalon.
yes. So the hindbrain has three main components. There is medulla oblongata, there is pons, and there is cerebellum. Midbrain,
Is this from inferior to superior?
this is from inferior to superior. We are studying from, there is spinal cord, and above spinal cord there is medulla oblongata, and above medulla oblongata there is pons. Beneath, behind these structures is cerebellum. We are going to look at these separately. All right.
Okay, yes.
And there is forebrain. Forebrain is again divided into two main components. There is diencephalon and telencephalon. We are going to look at these in next slides. So there is a term that is used in the neuroanatomy is brain stem. The pons, medulla oblongata, and midbrain are collectively known as brain stem. There could be a MCQ or examiner can ask this question from you, that what is the difference between hindbrain and brain stem? The hindbrain is a term that is used collectively for medulla oblongata, pons, and cerebellum. And the brain stem is a collective term that is used for medulla oblongata, pons, and midbrain.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any confusion?
The Latin name for midbrain was also something with medulla,
Mesencephalon.
right?
Mesencephalon.
Mesencephalon. Okay.
Yes. So, first of all, forebrain. Forebrain's other name is also prosencephalon. When we look at the embryological development of nervous system, these terminologies are quite often used. So that's why I have mentioned these terminology. So the forebrain is collectively known as prosencephalon, and forebrain is divided into two main components, that is diencephalon and telencephalon. The diencephalon is the innermost structures. We have our forebrain. There you can look at the forebrain. The outermost structures are known as telencephalon, and the structures that are deeply embedded is termed as diencephalon.
Mm-hmm.
And the diencephalon consists of structures that are dorsal thalamus, hypothalamus, epithalamus, and subthalamus. These are the four main structures that make up the diencephalon. If there is a question that what are the structures that are included in diencephalon, then these four structures are the answers. These are the dorsal thalamus, ventral thalamus, epithalamus, and subthalamus. All right.
Yes.
And the structure that is remaining, the other outermost structures of the forebrain that is remaining, makes up the telencephalon. You can see the red shaded area, that is your telencephalon. The telencephalon is also known as cerebrum. So the outer structure of the brain, your forebrain, is telencephalon, and the fourth structure that is deeply embedded in the forebrain is your diencephalon. The telencephalon is also known as cerebrum, refers to the region of the brain that includes cerebral cortex and several subcortical structures including hippocampus and basal ganglia.
The white structure in the center,
Yes,
the most superior white structure,
yes.
isn't it the corpus callosum?
Yes, it is corpus callosum. This is the sagittal section, and if the section is made right in the middle of the brain, then we can see corpus callosum, that is attached communication between two cerebral hemispheres.
And it's not part of the diencephalon or telencephalon.
This is basically corpus callosum is white matter. These are the fibers. These are the communicating fibers. Like there are tracts.
Okay.
Like
Okay.
there are tracts in the spinal cord. In the corpus callosum, the communication between two cerebral hemispheres is carried out by this corpus callosum. So like there are two hemispheres and we need a communication between them. So there is corpus callosum that is communicating between two hemispheres, the information from right cerebral hemisphere to the left and from left to the right. So it is like a communicating fiber. All right.
So we cannot say it belongs anywhere because it just has fibers from parts of the
Yes, these are the
telencephalon
fibers.
or
These are the fibers, and there
yeah.
are other fibers too. There are commissural fibers, there are anterior fibers, there are transverse fibers that are basically the white matters that is communicate that is that have purpose of communication between the brain.
Yeah.
All right, we can move
Yes.
forward. Then after forebrain, coming down, this is your midbrain, the structure that lies between the forebrain and the hindbrain. It is the narrow part of the brain that connects the forebrain to the hindbrain, and the other name for midbrain is also mesencephalon. And it is shaded green, so you can visualize it clearly. And again, it is a sagittal section of the brain. We are looking from the side, and top of that is your forebrain, and the greenish area is your midbrain, and beneath the green area is your brain stem. Sorry, it is your hindbrain.
Clear.
Any confusion?
No.
All right. So that other images were from sagittal section that we are looking from the sides. But if we cut the brain like this, coronal section, frontal or coronal section, we cut the brain like this, and we see from right here, then these structures appear. The upper structure, that main structure is covering is your forebrain, and we can visualize the thalamus. Beneath the thalamus is our midbrain, that is also known as mesencephalon, and beneath the midbrain is our hindbrain, that is pons and medulla oblongata, and beneath that, that is removed, is your cerebellum. Let me know if you have any confusion regarding the section that we are viewing, that it is either sagittal section or it is coronal section or it is transverse section.
From the position wise,
Yes.
it is very central.
Yes, right. We have cut the brain like this in the coronal section, and we are looking from this side.
Okay.
All right. So the last part of the brain is your hindbrain, and hindbrain is composed of three main structures, that is pons, medulla oblongata, and cerebellum. The cerebellum is a structure that lies behind the pons and the medulla. Again, we are looking at the sagittal section. There is cerebellum behind pons and medulla. The structure above spinal cord is your pons, that is shown with yellow circle, and above it is your pons, and behind the structure is cerebellum. It is clear?
Yeah.
The pons is situated on the anterior surface of the cerebellum. It is inferior to the midbrain, and it is superior to the medulla oblongata. All right.
Yes.
Medulla oblongata, it is the other name for medulla oblongata is Myelencephalon, and it is conical in shape, and it connects the pons superiorly to the spinal cord inferiorly. So it is the structure that is lying between the pons and the spinal cord. That is the, you can say that is the last structure of the brain, that is terminating in the foramen magnum. The foramen magnum, we looked at the image, and behind the foramen magnum is your spinal cord. So the last structure of the brain that is lying above foramen magnum is your medulla oblongata.
Clear.
Clear? Then there is the last structure, the cerebellum. The cerebellum is lying posterior to the pons and the medulla. It lies within the posterior cranial fossa of the skull, and it is posterior to the pons and medulla oblongata. and the name that is collectively used for cerebellum and the pons is Metencephalon. All right.
Why do we differentiate into the hind brain and the metencephalon?
These are the terminologies that are used in the textbooks, that it is based on the basically the embryologic development of nervous system. So when we study the embryologic development of nervous system, these terminologies are used: the Prosencephalon for forebrain, the Mesencephalon for midbrain, Metencephalon for pons and cerebellum, and Myelencephalon for medulla oblongata.
Because they derive from the same part.
Yes, maybe. I'm not sure about the reason, but these are the names that are widely used, and this could be asked that what are the structures that are included in Metencephalon, or maybe they can ask what are the structures that are included in Diencephalon, and so forth.
Okay.
So this is your total hindbrain. You can visualize pons, medulla oblongata, and behind these structures is the cerebellum, and beneath medulla oblongata is your spinal cord. And I have told you about the brain stem. There are the three structures. If we talk about midbrain, pons, and medulla, then these structures are known as brain stem.
Yes.
So when we talk about pons, medulla, and cerebellum, so we say this is hindbrain. When we talk about midbrain, pons, and medulla, then we call it brainstem. All right.
Clear. Yeah.
Okay. So the next structure, we are done with the basic terminologies of the brain, the basic parts of the brain, and then the next structure that starts beneath foramen magnum and continues in our vertebral column is your spinal cord. So it is situated within the vertebral canal of the vertebral column, and it is surrounded by three meninges like the brain, and the meninges that are dura mater, arachnoid mater, and the pia mater. We can visualize it in the image when we are looking from the back. The left image is your brain and spinal cord, and we are looking from the side view, sagittal section. When from side, the image in the blue color is your spinal cord. The structure that appears like a separated structure is your cerebellum, and obviously in front of cerebellum will be pons and medulla, and beneath these is your spinal cord. Any confusion?
No.
All right. So the spinal cord is roughly cylindrical and begins superiorly at the foramen magnum in the skull. This is a point that comes over and over again, that from where the spinal cord starts. So the terminal we have to memorize the structure, that is your foramen magnum in the skull. And which structure is ending at foramen magnum is your medulla oblongata. And from medulla oblongata, spinal cord is starting. You look confused.
The conus medullaris.
Yes.
Can you explain that structure?
Yes, we have just studied the first three lines, and we are moving to the next point. You have any confusion besides conus medullaris?
The first point is clear.
Yes, okay. So this termination is inferiorly in the lumbar region. Below the spinal cord tapers off into the conus medullaris from the apex, which is a prolongation of pia mater, and the phylum terminale descends to attach the back of coccyx. So the spinal cord is that in an adult person, the spinal cord does not run completely to the end of the sacrum or coccyx. It terminates at lumbar level at like T12, L1 or L2. Different textbooks, some textbooks say T12, L1, some textbooks say L1, L2. So we can three levels, T12, L1 and L2. At this point, the spinal cord terminates. and the point at which the spinal cord terminates is a point that is known as conus medullaris.
Okay.
All right. So we have from looking from the above section, the pons, medulla oblongata, and the cord, and the point their lumbar enlargement. The point beneath lumbar enlargement is your conus medullaris, the point where spinal cord ends. Beneath this point, the conus medullaris, there is no actual spinal cord. There are just simple nerves, and there is a thick band that is that starts from near about coccyx that attaches to the conus medullaris. It's like a string that is holding the spinal cord in place, and that string is known as phylum terminale.
Yeah.
Anything else?
The location of lumbar enlargement is the place where we have the different plexus.
Yes.
The lumbar plexus, and there was a second one.
Cervical plexus, brachial plexus.
Right. Yeah.
These are the plexus that are formed in the periphery, not in the spinal cord. The spinal cord, when the nerves branches off from the spinal cord, they move out, and they move out, then they come together and may form plexus. These are not included in the central nervous system, not in the spinal cord. The plexus are formed in the periphery. That cervical area, nerves came out, they combined and make plexus, and then the nerves further came out. So this enlargement has nothing to do with the plexus formation. The plexus are formed in the periphery, not in the spinal cord.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
Any other question?
No.
All right. So again, we are looking at the spinal cord from the back. You can visualize the brain, and then spinal cord is coming down. From spinal cord in the periphery, the nerves spread out. These nerves are spinal nerves, and then these nerves come out, and then they come together and form plexus. There is cervical plexus, there is brachial plexus, there is lumbosacral plexus. And from plexus, the nerves, different nerves come out, like ulnar nerve, median nerve, sciatic nerve, and all of these nerves. All right.
Mm-hmm.
And when we talk about the vertebral column, it is divided into regions. There are mainly regions, that is cervical region, thoracic region, lumbar region, sacral region, and coccyx region. So the nerves that come out from the spinal cord in the cervical area are named as cervical nerves. The nerves come out of thoracic area are known as thoracic nerves, and there are lumbar nerves, and there are sacral and coccygeal nerves. All right.
Yes.
Okay, so this is the section, that is the transverse section of spinal cord, that we have cut the spinal cord like this, and we are looking from the above section. First we are looking from the back or from the side. Now we have cut the spinal cord and we are looking from the above side. All right.
Yeah.
So again, there is a distribution. There is white matter and there is gray matter. The thing that is basically H-shaped or butterfly shape is your gray matter, and around these the area is your white matter, and the gray matter contains cell bodies of neurons, and the white matter contains the axons of neurons. We will be studying this deeply, and the structure, that what is that enlargement, that is basically posterior root ganglion, there is posterior root that is sensory, there is anterior root that is motor, then they come out and form nerve, but we would be discussing this mainly in the spinal cord section. So the above image is the coronal section of brain, and the below the image is the coronal section of cross section of spinal cord. Mm-hmm. All right.
Yeah.
So are we clear with the central nervous system? So we can move forward to the peripheral nervous system.
Yes, everything's fine.
Okay, so here comes the peripheral nervous system. As the name indicates, nervous system that is lies in the periphery, that is coming out of spinal cord, or basically brain is forming our peripheral nervous system. And there are two, as the name indicates, there are the what are the two parts that are of central nervous system?
The
But
motor part and the sensory part.
okay, what are the two main parts that make up the central nervous system?
The brain and the spinal cord.
Yes. So the nerves that come out of brain are known as cranial nerves. All right. And the
Mm-hmm.
nerves that come out of spinal cord are known as spinal nerves.
Yeah.
Is it fine?
Yeah.
So in that image, there are no cranial nerves shown, but there are spinal nerves shown. The nerves that are coming out, that are branching from the spinal cord, that are spread all over the body are your spinal nerves. And there are 31 pairs of spinal nerves and 12 pairs of cranial nerves. All right.
Yes.
So there are two types of nerves that are constituting peripheral nervous system. The first is cranial nerves and the other are spinal nerves. The cranial nerves are 12. There is olfactory, optic, oculomotor, trochlear, trigeminal, abducens, vestibulocochlear, and so on. And the last one is your hypoglossal nerves. All right. So
Mm-hmm.
right now I want to tell you that these are the nerves that are coming out of the brain directly, not from the spinal cord. That is why the name is cranial nerves. And their main function is mainly lies in the cranial cavity, the face, the jaw, all of these. There are few exceptions that we will discuss, but their main function lies right in that area from where they are coming out. And the spinal cord is the nerves that are coming out of the spinal cord are supplying the whole body, and they are controlling the whole body. And the nerves that are coming out from the brain, the cranial nerves, are controlling that specific area. This is just the
All right.
overview so that we can understand what are the structures. So when we go deep into these points, so we know the basics, so we can move forward. Then there is spinal nerves. So the nerves, as the name indicates, the nerves that are coming out of spinal cord are spinal nerves. So what would be the nerve name for the nerves that are coming from cervical area?
Cervical nerves.
From the nerves that are coming from
Uh,
the thoracic area?
thoracic nerves.
So the lumbar nerve, the sacral nerve, the coccygeal nerve, the nerve, this is simple. And it is there sometimes, most of the time they're denoted by the level. The nerve that is coming out at the C1 level is C1 nerve. The nerve that is coming out the C2, C3, C4, C5, this is the naming of the nerve. So when we talk about what is the L1 nerve, so the nerve that is coming out at the L1 area from the L1 vertebra, it's known as L1 nerve. Is it fine?
Yes.
So there are total 31 pairs of spinal nerves, and they come out of spinal cord. There is an intervertebral foramen that is formed in the vertebral area, and from then they come out of the vertebral column, and then they branch, they supply the whole body. And there are total 31 pairs. There are 8 cervical nerves, 12 thoracic, 5 lumbar, 5 sacral, and 1 coccygeal. So there are 31 pairs of spinal nerves, and these are supplying the whole body. Any confusion?
No?
All right, so this is a slide for the number of nerves. There are 8 pairs of cervical spinal nerves, 12 pairs of thoracic nerves, 5 pairs of lumbar nerves, 5 pairs of sacral nerves, and 1 pair of coccygeal nerves. And the name would indicate C1, C2, C3, C4, C5, C6, C7, C8, and then T1 to T12, L1 to L5, S1 to S5, and 1 coccygeal spinal nerves. Any confusion?
No?
All right. So again, this this is for the understanding of spinal nerves. This is C1, C2, C3, C4, C5, C6, C7, C8, C9, C8. Sorry, C8. And there is T1 to T12, and there is L1, L2, L3, L4, L5, S1, S2, S3, S4, and S5, and then there is CO, coccygeal nerve. All right.
Yes.
So we have studied the basic structures that are making up the nervous system, and we have come again to the image that we started. So this is the image that you are going to teach me, that what is it?
That's the parts or the division of the human nervous system, which is primarily divided into the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. The central nervous system being made up of the brain and the spinal cord. The brain and the spinal cord make up the part which receives information and processes it, and they both have extensions. They both have nerves,
Yes.
cranial or spinal nerves,
Yes.
and on the other side, the peripheral nervous system, which uses these nerves to conduct motor input or to provide sensory information through their motor neurons or sensory neurons. And then again, the motor neurons are divided into the voluntary controlled ones and into the involuntary, the autonomic nervous system, and which is further divided in the sympathetic and parasympathetic.
Great. So you have any confusion regarding this? Any confusion regarding concepts? Because we have just looked at these structures superficially. We would be studying these in detail when, like when we are studying spinal cord. So we will be covering all the sections that spinal cord includes. What is gray matter? What is white matter? What are the nerves? So do you have any confusion regarding the organization of nervous system?
No.
Okay, all right. Let's see what we have left. So this is your brain. The image at the B part. The image, we are looking at the brain from the top. So we have two hemispheres. We can see two hemispheres. There is right cerebral hemisphere. There is left cerebral hemisphere. All right.
Yeah.
The image at the A. We are looking the brain from down. That there is brain, and we are looking from this area. So this is your, we can see the cerebellum part, a part of cerebellum. Then there is a part of like spinal cord, and then there is medulla and pons that is typically hidden. And in the C part, we are looking from the sagittal section. Here we can look at the cerebellum very clearly. And then there is your forebrain, and midbrain is not so clear. And the other picture is again from the sagittal section. All right.
Yeah.
So there are few lobes of the brain. We will be studying these lobes when we are studying the cerebrum. There is a frontal lobe that is on the front area. There is parietal lobe, and there is occipital lobe, and there is temporal lobe. There are four lobes, and they are named according to the bone that is covering this. If you remember, there was anatomy of skull. There is frontal bone, there is parietal bone, there is occipital bone, and there is temporal bone. So the bone that is covering the part of the brain is named according to that bone. The area of brain that is covered by frontal bone is frontal lobe, the parietal lobe, the occipital lobe, and temporal lobe. And
Yeah.
all of these lobes have different functions. For example, the frontal lobe is mainly motor, the parietal lobe is sensory, occipital lobe is mainly concerned with vision, and we will be discussing it deeply when we will be focusing on the topic of cerebrum.
But the lobes do not only consider the outer part, the Telencephalon, but also the inner part, the Diencephalon.
Yes. The lobes cover the all of the part. That there is frontal lobe, we have a different gyri. There is precentral gyrus, there are postcentral gyrus that are dividing these lobes into different area, and these lobes have specialized function. That the vision is mainly connected with the occipital lobe. If there is any if there is a clinical point that a person has an injury at the occipital area and his occipital lobe is damaged, so the consequences we would see are that his vision would be impaired. He would not, his speech would not be affected, his gait would not be affected much, but his vision would be affected. And
Yeah.
when we talk about there is an injury to the parietal lobe, there is infarction, there is trauma, or there is anything else. So the main consequence you would see in the patient would be in the sensory system. Same is the case. There is an area that is Broca's area that is concerned, that is located in the frontal lobe, that is concerned with the speech. So that then when that area is damaged, you see the person cannot speak. So these are the significances of these lobes when we study it. Okay, what are the structures included in these lobes and what are the functions they are performing, and that's why we're studying that. If when we are in the clinical grounds, we are seeing any patient, so we can see that with the symptoms which area is damaged, so we can formulate a treatment plan. All right.
Clear.
So this is your central nervous system. When we look from the back, the brain and the spinal cord. When we look from the side, the brain and the spinal cord. So the topics that would be covered in the next section are the basic terminologies. Like we have discussed the basic divisions. Now we have to understand the basic terminologies that are used uh, very much in the text. That are what is a nerve, what are the types of nerves, how the nerve is made, what is ganglion, what is nuclei, what is white matter, what is gray matter. So whenever this terminology is used, that there is a white matter in the spinal cord, so you understand what is it pointing at. They are telling you that there is gray matter and spinal cord. So what is the meaning of these? They are telling you that there is ganglion, there is sympathetic ganglion, there is parasympathetic ganglion. So what is the meaning of ganglion? So when we know that what is the meaning of ganglion, it would be easier for us to understand what is parasympathetic ganglion and sympathetic ganglion. So these are few terminologies that we will be covering in the next section. So after that, the topic of the organization nervous system would be over. And if you have any questions, you can ask.